Four of the main characters in the book of Proverbs are the wise and the fool, the righteous and fill in the blank. What would you say is the opposite of the righteous? The unrighteous? How about sinner? Matter of fact, the word sinner does appear in the book of Proverbs. It's only there 6 times, but it's there. The Hebrew word means to miss the way or go the wrong way. But that's not the one, it seems to me, in the book of Proverbs is the opposite of the righteous. In studying this book as I have come to the conclusion that the opposite of being righteous in the book of Proverbs is being wicked. As a matter of fact, that term and some of the synonyms appear over 150 times in the book of Proverbs. This is a major subject in the book. Now, I think you have to keep remembering that Solomon wrote this book to his son, who undoubtedly at this point was a young man. And Solomon, in essence, is saying to his son, you need to know that there are wicked people in the world. Perhaps part of that is you should not become one of them. But no doubt another issue is you just need to know there are wicked people in the world, and you need to know how to identify them to not being hurt by them. So, what does the book of Proverbs have to say about wicked people? What do you have to do to qualify to be a wicked person, for example? Well, that's what I want us to discuss today. And I'm going to follow a similar outline that I've done in discussing some of these other people, like, first of all, just describing, or I should say defining what wickedness is in the book of Proverbs. Then I want to describe them. Now, it seems to me, as I've tried to analyze all of this material in terms of all of these individuals, that very often the Proverbs is telling us something about what they think or what they are. Then it's telling us something about what they say. And then, of course, it talks about what they do. So in describing them, I'm going to talk about those 3 areas. But first, let's just define the word wickedness in the book of Proverbs. Actually, there are a number of different words, Hebrew words, that are translated wicked. Wicked, the word itself, the Hebrew word, means to be evil, to be bad. That particular word occurs 68 times in the book of Proverbs. Then there's another word that means wicked, but it actually means criminal. Interesting. It could mean being hostile to God, against God, or against man. And that one appears 78 times in the book of Proverbs. I mentioned a minute ago the word wicked. There's another word translated wickedness, and it means to be violent. It speaks of being committing a crime against civil law. It only appears 5 times in the book of Proverbs. Another word, a synonym for wickedness, appears 10 times, but only twice referring to people, and it means trouble. Then there's the word evil itself, which appears 10 times, but only on one of those occasions is it referring to a person. Now, those are the words that pertain to wickedness in the Bible. I think that when we think of the opposite of being righteous, I would think of the word sinner. But this is going a bit beyond that. As we shall see as we go through a description of wicked people, this is a lot more than just sinning. It seems to me that a person could do something and it could be called wicked, but that a genuinely wicked person is someone that not only breaks the law, that's sin, but is doing something that's evil in the sense that it hurts other people. So I think I would put into this category the scammers, the swindlers, the seducers in life. Those that are knowing what they're doing and they are hurting people in the process. I've mentioned this before, but it happened to me again. As a matter of fact, this week, I was studying this subject in the book of Proverbs, and the house phone rang. Now, when was the last time you used your house phone? Everything's the cell phone. And I've mentioned this before, and it came through my cell phone. This time it came to my house phone. They have both of my numbers now. And the house phone has an answering machine. So it doesn't go to voicemail. It goes to this answering machine, so I can hear it. I did that deliberately. I can hear whoever's trying to leave a message. It was that Social Security scam. Your Social Security number has been lifted, stolen, defrauded, whatever, and you need to call us immediately. Only this time, they didn't threaten me with arrest. So either they've been warned or they've changed their message. And I sat there and listened to that and I thought, oh, that's wickedness. That is the kind of thing I think the book of Proverbs is talking about. I think other things can be involved, but the core of this idea, it seems to me, is that it hurts other people. Now, all sin can hurt other people, but this is designed to hurt other people, and I think that's the little difference. All right, then let's describe these people. And I'm going to start by, I've called it what they think. It really has to do with who they are as an individual. The first thing I would say is this: they're proud. Proverbs 21 verse 4 says, "A haughty look, a proud heart, and the plowing of the field are sin." Now, I'm going to reshuffle that deck and put those three things mentioned in that verse in chronological order. The verse doesn't give them in this order, but I'm going to put them in what I think happens first, second, and third. I think it starts with a proud heart. Then there is a haughty look. And then there is the plowing that is sin. That sounds odd. I didn't know plowing was sin. Well, if it comes from a proud heart, virtually everything you do is sin because it leaves God out. And that's the point. So he happens to land on plowing, but he could have put anything in its place. But the point is that that verse is saying at the bottom is a proud person. And that is called wicked, as we shall see. So a wicked person at the very, very bottom is a proud person. The Bible says in Proverbs 21:29, "A wicked man hardens his face, but as for the upright, he establishes his way." Now, this little expression, hardens his face, is probably a figure of speech, just saying he doesn't listen. He hardens his face to what you are saying. Somebody has said, there is an invisible sculptor who chisels the face into conformity with the attitude of soul. Thought that was extremely well put. That the attitude of soul is chiseled on your face. And there are people who, they reveal their heart of pride and arrogance by the look on their face. Simply said, they're obstinate. They're not going to listen. I'm right and everybody else is wrong. That is a proud, haughty attitude. Then Proverbs 2 verses 13 and 14 say, obviously, they leave righteousness. Those verses say, those who leave the paths of righteousness to walk in the way of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perversity of the wicked. In other words, they leave doing what's right so that they can do, according to these verses, what is evil and wicked. That one's obvious. But then it says this, in Proverbs 28:5, evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand all. When people disobey the Lord, their sense of what is right is perverted. They find it difficult to understand justice. They have no true standard of right and wrong. Wickedness corrupts people's reasoning. They operate on false principles. So they don't even understand what is justice or righteousness. Matter of fact, this passage says, they leave the paths of righteousness to walk in the ways of darkness. It's rather interesting that they should use that metaphor. The Bible uses light and darkness, especially in the Gospel of John, as sin and righteousness. And then it says in John 3:19, men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. Interesting. When your deeds are evil, it's an indication that there's something much more serious going on, so to speak, and that's in your heart. There is evil. So that evil people love darkness. They call darkness light and light darkness. They call evil good and good evil. They have a perverse sense of what is right and what is wrong. Then, as if all that's not bad enough, they detest righteousness. So they have a proud heart. They don't understand what's right. Then they detest what's right. It's getting worse by the minute. Proverbs 29:27 says, an unjust man is an abomination to the righteous. That is, the righteous people detest wicked people. Then it says, and he who is upright in the way is an abomination to the wicked. Unrighteousness is an abomination to the righteous, and the unrighteous feel the same way about the righteous. In other words, they detest each other. They are disgusted with each other. There was once a friend of Socrates who lived a riotous and reckless life, who once said to him, Socrates, I hate you. For every time I see you, you show me for what I am. Maybe that's the reason wicked people hate righteous people. They expose who they are. There's more. They desire evil. Proverbs 21:10 says, the soul of the wicked desires evil. His neighbor finds no favor in his eyes. Wow. These people are bent on evil. Not merely sin, but they're bent toward evil. They desire to do evil. And they don't spare anybody. If you get in their way, when they crave evil, you are harmed. They're addicted to evil. Proverbs 12:12 says, they covet evil devices. That verse says, the wicked covet the catch of evil men, but the root of the righteous yield fruit. And the idea is this: when evil men see other evil people succeed, they are envious and try to emulate what they do. They have this desire, they covet it, and so they plan it. Proverbs 6:12 through 14 says, "A worthless person, a wicked man, walks with a perverse mouth. He winks with his eye. He shuffles his feet. He points with his finger. Perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord." Now the word translated worthless means good for nothing, unprofitable. But all this stuff about the winking of the eye and the shuffling of the feet and the pointing of the finger is talking about the fact that he communicates with body language, or at least that's what we could call it. He goes on to say he's planning evil and sowing discord. So he has this intent on doing evil. He plans it. He covets it. He desires new ways to do it. This is a genuinely wicked person. One of his weapons is deceit. Proverbs 12:20 says, "Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but the counselors of peace have joy." It is malicious deceit that is in their heart. One more. And they're never satisfied. Proverbs 10:3 says, "The Lord will not allow the righteous soul to famish, but he cast away the desire of the wicked." That little phrase, God cast away the desire of the wicked, seems to indicate that they're never satisfied. God's not going to let them be satisfied. So, to sum up what I have said thus far, this is the core of a wicked person. They are proud people who refuse to listen to reason or righteousness. They leave righteousness. They do not understand justice. They desire evil. They covet evil devices. They plan evil. They deceive people, and they are never satisfied. This week I was actually studying something else besides Proverbs, and I came upon a study I had done in the past on the word wicked in the New Testament, or at least the word. And in my notes of what I had done before, I discovered that in Mark 7:22 it uses the word wicked. And then I listed what various commentators said about the meaning of the Greek word wicked. And here's what I had written. It is an act of malicious wickedness. Another said it is deliberate malice. Another said it is active evil. And then one said it loves to trouble his neighbor and do him ill. I think that captures what wickedness in the book of Proverbs is about. Based on all these things that are said about such a person, that person is out to do harm. They think about it, they plan it, they covet it, they do it. They hurt people. My wife has an expression that she sometimes uses, like, "I don't have a folder for that." And I looked at this and I thought, I don't have a folder for this. I don't know. As a pastor and somebody who spent hundreds and thousands of hours, literally, over the years listening to people, I very often understand what they're going through and empathize and sympathize. I don't get this at all. I just don't get this at all. I had a conversation recently with a fella who pointed out that the exterior door had hinges on the outside. And he said, didn't like that because you could just take the pin out of the hinge and get in the door. And I looked at that and I said, that would never occur to me. I never noticed the hinge was on the outside, and if I did, it would never occur to me you could take the pin out to break in the door. I just don't have a folder for that. And that's the problem. If you don't have a folder for that, then you could be the target of that. So you need to understand how to spot wicked people. So he describes what they are like, then he describes what they say, the way they talk. So let's go back and see if we can put in focus this wicked person. For example, Proverbs 10:20 says, "The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little." What comes out of the mouth of a righteous man is valuable. It's like silver or gold. But what comes out of the mouth of a wicked person is worth little. Now, maybe that's a clue. Just listen to what they say. And if a lot of what they say is worthless, be careful. Or Proverbs 10:32 says, "The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked, what is perverse." They speak falsehood. They distort facts. Note that. They speak perversely. Another verse that says something similar is 12:6. It says, "The words of the wicked lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright will deliver them." So the wicked use words to lay fatal traps for the innocent and unwary, to destroy people. They speak evil. They speak perversely. They speak evil. 15:28 says, "The heart of the righteous studies how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours forth evil." The mouth of the wicked pours forth evil. Would that be a clue? If you hear somebody talking about evil, watch out. You're dealing with a wicked person. They're dangerous. The heart of the wicked is full of evil, so evil comes out of their mouth. An ungodly person opens his or her mouth, and out comes profanity, filth, and vileness. I mentioned Socrates a moment ago. There was another incident in his life where a young man wanted to learn wisdom, and he finally got into the presence of Socrates, and he was so awestruck with the famous philosopher that he didn't know what to say. So he just said nothing for a while. And finally, Socrates broke the silence and said, "Speak so I can see you. Speak so I can see you." I've mentioned this before, but I can't help but repeat it. My wife's sister, who lives in Dallas, has a proverb: "People tell you who they are, just listen." You can often tell what a person's like just by what they say or what they don't say. Matter of fact, as a pastor, listening to people for decades upon decades, I learned a long time ago that I could tell about people's spirituality sometimes by just listening to what they don't say. That in a certain context, I would expect them to say X, and they never do. And I know this is an indication of where they are spiritually. So, just listen to what they say. Then, we're told that their perverse words will be judged. For example, Proverbs 10:31 says, "The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut out." Now, this again is talking about what they say, but now it's going a step further and saying, and God's going to judge them. Or Proverbs 10:6 says, "Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but violence covers the mouth of the wicked." That's an indication they're going to talk about violence. Their mouth sometimes deceptively deceives people, and sometimes it reveals them. This says violence covers the mouth of the wicked. Then 11:18 says, "The wicked man does deceptive work, but he who sows righteousness will have a sure reward." So the wicked person is deceptive. Boy, is that critical. Now, I just said, sometimes what they say is a clue to who they are. But the real problem is they often are deceptive with their words. And that's what this proverb is saying. 12:5 says, "The thoughts of the righteous are right, but the counsels of the wicked are deceitful." And the word thoughts here means devices, plan, purpose. The wicked only have a selfish purpose, and they seek to obtain it by deception. A simple illustration, one we're all familiar with. Remember when the wise men came to Herod and said, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews?" And Herod, who was paranoid in the first place, had some of his children and his wife killed because he was so paranoid. He says, "Well, bring in the Pharisees. Where's this King of the Jew business? Where's he going to be born?" And they said, "That's simple. Micah says Bethlehem." So then Herod says to the wise men, "I'll tell you, tell me where he's going to be born, that I may go worship him." Deceptive words. Wasn't the truth at all. Proverbs 26:23 says, "Fervent lips with a wicked heart are the earthware covered with silver dross." In other words, warm words of friendship are used to disguise a heart filled with hate. Or 26:24 through 26 says, "He who hates disguises it with his lips." Did you hear that? He who hates disguises it with his lips and lays up deceit within himself. When he speaks kindly, do not believe him. For there are 7 abominations in his heart. Though hatred is covered by deceit, his wickedness will be revealed before the assembly. And he is simply saying, do not trust people who camouflage a hate-filled heart with kind, gracious words, because their heart is full of wickedness, which will eventually be exposed. Now, you got to capture the essence of what's going on here. You can sometimes tell who wicked people are just by listening to what they say. But they use deception. So you need to know what's going on so that you not be deceived by their flattery or their kind, gracious words. When Saul was plotting against David, he pretended with his words to honor David. Be careful. You've got to have some perception of what's going on, that you not be deceived and therefore harmed in some way by wicked people. 2 slick con men boarded a train that ran between New York and Boston and singled out a prosperous-looking individual. Sitting next to him, they invited him to play a game of cards. Soon, the prosperous-looking individual was several $100s in the red. The winner agreed to take a check, but once it was in his hand, He acted conscience-stricken and tore it up. I never thought you'd lose so much money. Let's call the whole thing off, he said. Impressed with their apparent generosity, the loser insisted on writing a new one. Later, when the check came back from the bank, he found not only the second one, but the first one had been cashed. The crook had quickly slipped the first one into his pocket and had torn up a blank one instead. The loser was on the hook twice. That's what wicked people do. They deceive you with speech. So you've got to pay very close attention. Matter of fact, one person can do a lot of damage. Proverbs 11:11 says, by the blessing of the upright, the city is exalted, but it is overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. A city can be overthrown by the mouth of the wicked. The broken promises, the fraud of the wicked are enough to ruin a whole city. You can't help but wonder if that's not referring to politicians, and I'm not trying to be funny. You got to know what's going on. One deceptive individual can do a lot of damage. A whole city in this case. When the Greeks were besieging Troy, they could not gain an entry. So they sent the Trojans a present, a giant wooden horse, as if it were a token of goodwill. You know the story. The Trojans opened the gate and took it in. And when the horse was filled with Greeks, who in the night broke out and dealt death and devastation to the city of Troy. They did it with deception. A Trojan horse. Listen carefully. Words can be a Trojan horse. Now, I said I was going to describe wicked people by talking about what they're like, what they are inside, what they say, and what they do. So let's talk about how they act. What's their behavior like? Proverbs 4:18 and 19 says, the way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know what makes them stumble. They walk in darkness. And as I mentioned, that's a reference to sin, a metaphor for sin in the Bible often. But because they walk in sin, they stumble. And so the metaphor is very appropriate. It's like they're walking in the dark and they can't see where they're going, so they stumble. That happened to me recently. I got up in the middle of the night and there were no lights on, and I was going to sneak out of the bedroom to not wake up Patricia, and there was something in the floor, and I stumbled all over it because it was dark and I couldn't see where I was going. Sin does that to people. It acts like they're walking in darkness and they stumble. So, wicked people stumble. They cannot see where they're going because sin has blinded their eyes. They go astray. 14:22 says, they do not go astray who that's a question. Do they not go astray who devise evil? But mercy and truth belong to those who devise good. And devise here means they practice it. So because they practice it, they go astray. Now it gets down to some really critical stuff. 17:11 says, an evil man seeks only rebellion. Therefore, a cruel messenger will be sent against him. This proverb is usually interpreted to mean that he is refusing to submit to government authority. Evil people refuse to submit to lawful authority. They are determined to go their way. And so they're not going to submit to government. Wow. Proverbs 12:26 says, the righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. The wicked can lead the righteous astray. If you're a parent or a grandparent or work with children in any way, you need to write this one down. Is there a pencil in the pew? We have some hospitality committee who put 3x5 cards in every pew, and their pen. You need to write this down. Proverbs 12:26. Write it down. The righteous should choose his friends carefully. Write it down. If you're a teenager, memorize this verse. The righteous should choose his friends carefully. Matter of fact, I would highly recommend that if you're a parent, you make your kids memorize that verse. Now, the way you do that is promise them an reward if they do. Don't just demand it. Promise to take them to Disneyland if they do, or something like that. But I mean, that's important. It's that important. You need to know, especially if you're a teenager, but you need to know that if you're an adult. Choose your friends carefully. Have I made that point? Matter of fact, I think I mentioned that my first introduction to the book of Proverbs was right after I graduated from seminary. I was a young man. I actually had black hair. And I was a youth speaker. And I did a series on Proverbs, chapter 1. And I'll never forget it. After the introduction, the first chapter of Proverbs says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And chapter 9 says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So you got to be right with the Lord to get this straight. Then it says, in essence, obey the law of your mother. And that's when I discovered God has laws, government has laws, and mother has laws. You need to obey your mother. And then it says, be careful of your peers. It's in Proverbs chapter 1. Every teenager should know about that passage of Scripture. And the point is, choose your friends carefully. And you've really got to be careful because you may marry one of them. Did that communicate? That communicated. All right. 11:23 says, the desire of the righteous is only good, but the expectation of the wicked is wrath. They expect it. Matter of fact, the contrast, because it talks about the desire of the righteous and the expectation of the wicked, seems to be indicating that the wicked want to vent their wrath. 10:16 says, the labor of the righteous leads to life, and the wages of the wicked to sin. The idea is whatever money they make, they use it to sin. 17:3 says, the wicked man accepts a bribe behind the back to pervert the way of justice. Behind the back is obviously a reference to the fact that it's done covertly. This probably is referring to people like judges who accept a bribe and therefore they pervert the way of justice. But of all the things Proverbs says about the wicked, one I find most fascinating is this. This is a telltale sign of a wicked person, even if they're young. Proverbs 12:19 says, a righteous man regards the life of his animal, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. A righteous man is kind toward animals. A wicked man is cruel toward animals. Even when he thinks he's being merciful, his merciful acts are cruel. Now, this verse has all kinds of ramifications. For one thing, it indicates God cares about animals. It's part of the Mosaic Law. Did you know that's in the Mosaic Law? Matter of fact, there are several verses. I'll just quote one. Exodus 23:5 says, "If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying under its burden, and you would refrain from helping, you shall surely help him with it." If you see an animal under distress and the animal is owned by somebody you hate, Moses says help the animal. That's how much God cares about animals. All of which pet lovers agree. Now, this says, tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. Tender mercies are cruel? Yeah, it's an oxymoron. It's like compassionless compassion or loveless love. A wicked man's cruelty to animals is such that he thinks he's being gentle. Incredible. So you need to note that down. If a small child or a teenager or an adult is cruel to animals, note it, that is a wicked person. That's what Solomon said 1,000 years before Christ. Not quite, but close. A commentator in 1846, commenting on this proverb, said, quote, "The delight of children in putting animals to pain for amusement, if not early retained, will mature them in cruelty, demoralizing their whole character and hardening them against all the sympathies of social life." That was in 1846. He goes on to quote another who says, quote, "He who delights in the suffering and destruction of inferior creatures and are not apt to be very compassionate to those of his own kind." That's in the 19th century. And 21st century psychologists say something similar. As a matter of fact, you've probably heard the reports that one of the characteristics of a mass killer is that as a child they were cruel to animals. This is a telltale sign. Note it. Now, it's interesting that Proverbs 29:7 says, "The righteous consider the cause of the poor, but the wicked do not understand such knowledge." And 12:10 says, "A righteous man regards the life of animals, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel." So you put all of this together and you quickly come up with the idea that you're cruel to animals, you're going to be cruel to other people. In this case, the wicked don't even understand, say, the cause of a poor person. They're so selfish that they don't understand people who are suffering. How are we doing? Does this help? Think you could spot a wicked person now? Be careful, because they can deceive you. I've given you some clues, but be careful. Now, to sum up everything I've said would take a whole paragraph. It would sound like this: the wicked are proud, refuse to listen, leave the path of righteousness, do not understand justice, detest righteousness, desire evil, covet evil devices, plan evil, are never satisfied. What they say is worthless. They speak perversely, they speak evil, their perverse words will be judged, their speech conceals their violence, their speech destroys cities, they walk in darkness, they go astray, they refuse to submit to authority, they deceive, they lead others astray, they want to vent their wrath, they use their earnings to sin, they accept bribes, they're cruel to animals, and they do not understand being concerned about the poor. Is that a mouthful or what? But you need to pick out a few things. You can sometimes tell them by their speech, because the speech reveals the heart. Jesus taught that. And perhaps a big clue is the way they treat animals is the way they're going to treat people. Do you remember the three monkeys? Remember that? What is it? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Remember that? All kinds of interpretations of what that means. Some say it means a good mind, good speech, and good actions. Some say it means turning a blind eye. I always thought it meant see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Is that the way you heard it? Yeah. All right, let me give you an image for a wicked person. His hands are not over his eyes, not over his ears, and not over his mouth. They're hanging by his side. So he sees evil, desires evil, craves evil, speaks evil, and does evil. He's the opposite of the three monkeys. Or to say the same thing another way, a wicked person is an evil monkey as compared to the monkeys who see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Now, I said at the beginning, this book was written by Solomon to his son, and that no doubt one of the issues is don't be evil, and another issue is don't look out for evil people. Now, I have spent most of the time saying you should look out for them. Let me conclude by giving you some suggestions in Proverbs about not being one. 3 suggestions. Number 1, fear the Lord. Proverbs 16:6 says, in mercy and truth atonements are provided for iniquity, and by the fear of the Lord one departs from evil. By the fear of the Lord one departs from evil. 19:23 says, the fear of the Lord leads to life, and he who has it will abide in satisfaction. He will not be visited with evil. So, you want to avoid evil? Start by fearing the Lord, which I think, as you've heard me explain, involves all kinds of little nuances like reverence and respect, and yes, fear if you step out of line. I think it would also include things like trusting the Lord and obeying the Lord. The point is, if you really want to avoid evil, make sure you have a good relationship with the Lord. Secondly, get wisdom. Proverbs 1:33 says, but whosoever listens to me will dwell safely, wisdom is speaking, and will be secure without fear of evil. So wisdom says you will dwell safely and be secure if you listen to wisdom, and you will not be caught in evil. You won't have to worry about evil. Also, Proverbs 2:10 through 12 says, when wisdom enters your heart and knowledge is pleasant to your soul, discretion will preserve you, understanding will keep you to deliver you from the way of evil, from the man who speaks perverse things. That is probably the issue. That if wisdom and knowledge is in your heart and you understand it, it will keep you from the way of wisdom and from the man who speaks perverse things. That captures both of the things I've been trying to say. So, fear the Lord, get wisdom, and obviously depart from evil. So Proverbs 3:7 says, do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord, and depart from evil. Again, that one sort of sums up everything I've said. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. Now, you've heard me say in this series that he who is right in his own wise is a fool. This verse says, do not be wise in your own eyes and depart from evil. Don't be a fool. Listen to the Lord. Listen to reason and righteousness. 3:29 says, do not devise evil against your neighbor, for he dwells by you for safety's sake. And again, the idea is don't do evil. Depart from evil. and stay away from evil people. Matter of fact, Paul said something similar to that. In 1 Corinthians 15:33 he says, Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. Evil company. So you need to depart from evil and be very aware of wicked people. Amen? Amen. Good stuff? Yes. Straight out of the Word of God in the book of Proverbs. Now, one more minor point. In the book of Proverbs, there are choices. I mentioned that I went through the book of Proverbs and I isolated everything it says about the wise and everything it says about the fool. And then I isolated everything it says about the righteous, and now I'm telling you I isolated everything it says about the wicked. And I spent hours, I spent months doing that with all these topics we're going to be talking about. And then one day it hit me. That's not the way Solomon wrote the book. He didn't isolate all the verses on righteousness and wisdom and all the verses on unrighteousness or wickedness and foolishness. He put them together. And he said, be wise, be righteous. And in the same verse, don't be a fool and don't be wicked. Why did he put them together so often? And it dawned on me, perhaps one of the great messages in all of the book of Proverbs is, life is full of choices. You can either be wise or a fool, or you can be righteous or wicked. You choose. You just need to know. Choices have consequences. I said that early in the series, and then I added, choices have consequences, and you have a choice over the choice. You can decide what decision you're going to make. You have no choice over the consequences. So choose righteousness over wickedness, or you will waste your life. And according to one of the Proverbs we saw, be judged. David Livingstone was a famous Scottish missionary to Africa. In 1874, he was buried in Westminster Abbey. The streets were lined with thousands of people paying their respects to this great pioneer missionary. An old man in the crowd who was extremely dirty and poorly clad was weeping bitterly. Someone asked him why he was especially sorrowful over the death of Livingstone. The old man replied, I'm not weeping so much for him as for myself. He went on to say, David and I were born in the same village, were brought up in the same schools and church, and worked together in the same loom. But he wisely went in the right direction and I in the other. Now he is revered by the nation, and I am neglected, unknown, and dishonored. I have nothing to look forward to but a drunkard's grave. Choose wisdom. Choose righteousness for your own sake. Father,